Hello everyone. This is Grade 10 CBSE Nationalism in India Part 2. In this part, let us see what were the economic and political situations created by the First World War, idea of Satyagraha, and various Satyagraha movements organized by Gandhiji. The three things we are going to see in this part 2. First, let us see what were the new economic and political situations created by the First World War in India. Here we have to remember 5 things. Increase in defense expenditure, prices doubled, crop failure resulted in shortage of food, influenza epidemic. Because of these reasons, 12 to 13 million people died. Very simple. First World War, it led to a huge increase in defense expenditure for the Britain. But that expenditure was financed by the war loans and they have increased the tax in India. That is their headache. That should be financed with their own nation's income. But Indians are innovative, so they charged Indians. The customs duties were raised and income tax was introduced first of all. That irritated the people like anything. Second thing, during the war years, I mean 1913 to 1918, there was the price increase, doubled. That lead to extreme hardship for the common people. Common people, the poor people were not able to face with the price doubling. Above all, villages are called upon to supply soldiers. So in the First World War, India helped Britain in the First World War. And the villagers were forcibly recruited to supply the soldiers. So this caused widespread anger in the village. People were not ready to lose their lives for the purpose of British, for the sake of British. The fourth reason, crop failure. In addition to these reasons, crop failure resulted in shortage of food. Already I told you during the war years, people were prices double. In addition to that, this crop failure occurred in 1920 to 21. I mean next year of the World War, next 2 years of the World War. Because of this crop failure, there was a shortage of food grains. So common people were facing many problems. These problems were accompanied with influenza epidemic. Influenza epidemic is a disease. Influenza is a disease. If a person is caught by the disease, his legs will swell like elephant. Yanikal Vyadi. Both of the patient's legs will be swelled like elephant leg size. So that was an epidemic in those period. That was a great challenge to government as well as to the people. Because of these reasons, 12 in the year 1921, I mean 3 years after the First World War, 12 to 13 million people died. So these were the new economic and political situations created by the war, I mean by the First World War in India. Now let us move on to the ideas of people are believing that these hardships would end after the war was in. The war will get over. All the problems will be solved. They were waiting. Their endurance was a question mark. That did not happen. So during this period, Mahatma Gandhi entered. Mahatma Gandhi returned from South Africa to India in the year 1950, where he tried the novel method, Satyagraha, I mean non-violence method. He tried this method to fight against racial segregation in South Africa, and he got success also in that. So now let us see what is the idea of Satyagraha in detail. He used a novel method of mass agitation. What are the ideas of Satyagraha? Satyagraha is Satya means truth, Graha means inner sense, truth in your consciousness. So idea of Satyagraha, it emphasizes the power of the truth and need to search for the truth. Satyagraha is nothing but power of the truth. He says that if the cause was true, if the struggle was against injustice, physical force is not necessary to fight the oppressor. He may be a rowdy, he may be a powerful person. If your side there is a justice, if your side you are true, the cause is true. If you are fighting against the injustice, I mean, if you are struggling to get your justice, then physical force is not at all necessary. Without seeking vengeance, we need not have vengeance, revenge, and we need not be aggressive, rude. Not necessary. We need not use weapons, arms, this and that. Satyagrahi could win the battle through non-violence. So Gandhiji believed in this dharma, and he exercised this practice in South Africa and got success also. He decided to use the same dharma here in India also to fight against the British to get independence. So after arriving India, Mahatma Gandhi, I told you that everybody knows that he returned from South Africa in the 1915. In the next 3 years, he organized 3 Satyagraha movements in 3 different places. He started explaining the people about this idea of Satyagraha, and he moved to the various places and he spoke with the people, analyzed their problem, explained the idea of Satyagraha, and mobilized their support for the mass agitation. So first let us see, where did he go? In the northeastern state, first he moved to Chambaran in Bihar. He had been to Bihar state, and in that place, Chambaran, he organized the peasants plantation work, peasants plantation system. There, indigo plantation system. There, the peasants were forced by the British government to produce indigo, but they were not paid reasonably. If once indigo is cultivated, the land will lose its fertility. Or for 5 or 6 years, you cannot cultivate anything else after that. So peasants refused to cultivate the indigo, but the peasants were forced by the colonial government to cultivate indigo to supply for the England textile industries. Indigo is a color. Indigo is a plant which produces color. Okay, and they were not paid, like that is labor intensive. If they produce indigo, if they cultivate indigo, the land will lose its fertility. It is labor intensive. They were not paid properly. So the plantation peasants, they refused to cultivate indigo. Gandhiji knows that. So he had been to Chambaran and he spoke with the people. He organized, explained Satyagraha policies, and he organized Satyagraha movement in Pessan, in Chambaran. Then he moved to his own state, Gujarat. There he had been to Kedah district. There the peasants had different problem. Kedah district, Gujarat peasants had different problem because they were not able to pay the revenue tax which was charged by the colonial government high. Because of the crop failure and many reasons, they were not able to pay that high rent which is charged by the colonial government. When they demanded to reduce the tax, the British government refused. So the peasants were struggling to maintain their family, they have to pay the tax, they were in a turmoil. Gandhiji met the peasants in Kedah district and he explained his idea of Satyagraha, and he organized Satyagraha movement in Kedah district of Gujarat also in the next year. In 1917, in many books it is given as 1916, in the first Chambaran Bihar, in this book it is given as 1917. Then in 1915, Gandhiji returned to India. 1916, he organized peasants plantation Satyagraha movement in Chambaran, Bihar. 1917, he organized Satyagraha movement to support the peasants of Kedah district of Gujarat. Then the next year, he had been to Ahmedabad of the Gujarat, same Gujarat, He had been to Ahmedabad in the next year, I mean 1918. There the cotton mill workers had their own problem. They were not paid properly. They were exploited more than standard working hours, I mean more than 8 hours. They were expected to work. They were not provided good working conditions. So the cotton mill workers had their own problems. As we have seen in the first part, different people face different problems because of the colonial government policies. Here, the cotton mill workers in Ahmedabad, they had their own problems. Gandhiji mobilized their mass support and he organized the Satyagraha movement in Ahmedabad among the cotton mill workers. So Gandhiji successfully organized 3 movements in 3 places within 3 years. Emboldened with this success, Gandhiji decided to launch a nationwide Satyagraha against Rowlatt Act in the next year, I mean in the 1919. 1915 he returned from South Africa. 1916 he organized Satyagraha movement in the Champaran district, Bihar. 1917 he organized Satyagraha movement in Kedah district of Gujarat. 1918 Mahatma Gandhi went to Ahmedabad and he organized Satyagraha movement. Okay. In the next year, he decided to launch a nationwide Satyagraha. In single places, he had organized Satyagraha movement. Then he mobilized the mass support. At that time, there was the Act Imperial Legislative Council hurriedly passed an act called Rowlatt Act. This act gave enormous power to the British government to arrest the political leaders, I mean the prominent leaders who are the national leaders who fight for the freedom of India. So the British government wanted to clamp down these national leaders to support this. This act was hurriedly passed in the Legislative Council. Imperial Legislative Council is the legislative assembly of colonial government. According to this act, the government can arrest any political leaders. They can be imprisoned for more than 2 years without trial. No vaida, no inquiry. They can be imprisoned for 2 years. This was denied by the Indian Legislative Council members, but the British government least burdened. So Mahatma Gandhi now he wanted to launch non-violent civil disobedience against such unjust law that would start with the Hartal on 6th April. Hartal is lockdown. I mean, the shops will be closed. Children will not go to school. People will not go to shop and they will not work. Buses will not run. Everything will stop. So he has decided to launch non-cooperation movement nationwide against this Rowlatt Act. In this chapter, so we have seen 3 things. First thing, new economic and political situations created by the First World War, increase in defense expenditure which was financed by the taxes collected in India, prices doubled which lead to extreme hardship for the common people, forced recruitment irritated the rural people, forced recruitment for the military supply the soldiers that caused widespread anger in the village side, crop failure resulted in shortage of food. These problems had been accompanied with the influenza epidemic. Because of these reasons, 12 to 13 million people perished in an epidemic. The next thing we have seen, idea of Satyagraha. This is a novel method of mass agitation. Satya means truth. Gandhiji explained the Satyagraha, idea of Satyagraha. It emphasized the power of truth. If the cause is true, if your cause is true, if you are fighting against injustice, if you are fighting for your justice, to get justice, then physical force is not at all necessary. Without seeking vengeance, you need not be aggressive. You can win the battle with non-violence. This will appeal the conscience of the oppressor. Even he may be the rowdy, he may be the powerful person, but definitely if he is the accused, if he committed some mistake, definitely that will rip the conscience of the oppressor. So this is the power of the non-violence. It may look like passive resistance, but its power is great. Its power is strong. So Mahatma Gandhi decided to, Mahatma Gandhi exercised the same novel method in South Africa against the racial segregation, and he got success also. With that success, he returned to India in 1915. He had decided to meet the people of various places. He organized a Satyagraha movement in within 3 years in 3 places, mobilized the mass support. First, he had been to Bihar. There in the place called Chambaran, he met the plantation peasants, indigo plantation peasants, and he organized Satyagraha. He explained this the idea of Satyagraha, which is non-violent method, and he mobilized the mass support of these indigo plantation peasants. He organized Satyagraha movement in Chambaran, Bihar in 1916. In 1917, he organized peasant Satyagraha movement in Kerala district of Gujarat against the high revenue, high tax charged. Then next year, I mean in the 1918, Mahatma Gandhi went to Ahmedabad to organize Satyagraha movement among the cotton mill workers. Emboldened with this, so 3 years, 3 places he has organized Satyagraha movement. Emboldened with this success, Gandhiji decided to launch a nationwide Satyagraha against Rowlatt Act in the year 1919. The Rowlatt Act gave enormous power to the British government to arrest any political prominent leaders like Gandhiji, Nehru, and other leaders, Motilal Gandhiji, Nehru, Lala Lajpat Rai. Any leaders can be arrested without warrant. They can be arrested without trial. They can be imprisoned. No vaida, no question, no inquiry. They can be imprisoned. It gave the enormous power, which was hurriedly passed in the Legislative Council. British came after the First World War. It saw the situation in India where the people were mobilized by Gandhiji. So they wanted to clamp down these national leaders. This freedom struggle movement should be stopped. So the Imperial Legislative Council passed an act, Rowlatt Act. Gandhiji decided to launch nationwide Satyagraha against this unjust law. Let us stop with this. The next topic, let us see how in different places, how he had organized Satyagraha, non-cooperation movement.